Little information is recorded on Handan Chun in the historical records, and sometimes appear contradictory. He has 2 courtesy names recorded for him, and while this is a common feature of the elite class, some scholars still speculate that there could have been 2 people called Handan Chun. During the Three Kingdoms period, literacy rates were extremely low and were restricted for everyone. Handan Chun was a writer, calligrapher, and official from Yingchuan Commandery, but a few accounts state he was from Chenliu. Either way, Handan Chun was credited for restoring the archaic tadpole script tradition, and his most famous work is the Xiaolin, a collection of humorous anecdotes. The commentaries of the Walter Classic record that Handan Chun was a nephew of Du Shang and accompanied him when he became a magistrate in Quaji. His uncle wanted to set up a temple in Stili to honour Cao Yi, a local girl who died trying to save her father from drowning 8 years earlier in 143. The Quaji Dianlu, quoted in the Book of the Later Han, writes that Du Shang first commissioned Wei Lang to write the inscription. When he was asked how his work was going later at a drinking banquet, he responded negatively, and so apologised for his lack of skill. Du Shang then promptly asked Handan Chun to write the inscription instead, so he composed one without even revising it. This inscription was written by a scholar during a banquet, which were often places associated with writing poetry. The result was so good that Wei Lang destroyed his own draft on account of the 20-year-old Handan's extraordinary talent, and according to this record, he was probably born sometime around 130. Some argue that the Handan Chun who wrote this stele is different from the one that wrote the Xiaolin, the collection of humorous anecdotes. Not only is there a discrepancy regarding his hometown and courtesy name, but if it was the same person, he would have been in his 90s when writing the Xiaolin. Despite the discrepancy, Handan Chun served in Chang'an in the early 190s, but fled the city around the time of Dong Zhuo's rise to power. He went to serve in the staff of Liu Biao at Jing, a place which hosted literary salons, gatherings of scholars who created poetry either to please or to educate. Handan had become a noteworthy scholar by the year 199, as he was selected to write the funeral stele for Chen Ji. Chen Chun's father was an important figure at the time, so the choice to make Handan the inscriber could even imply he was famous by now. Around 10 years later, in 208, he accepted an invitation to join Cao Cao's court in Yi, and by 211 he became a scholar within the court of Cao Pi. Around 5 years after that, Cao Ji asked for him to be transferred to his court, and Cao Cao obliged. Handan arrived in Cao Ji's court in Linzi on a very hot day. When he first arrived, Cao Ji didn't speak to him and ordered his attendants to bring water for a cool bath. After bathing, Cao and Handan put powder on their faces, then sat bareheaded and bare-chested as they watched various performances. Only after the dance of the 5 hammers, the juggling of balls, and the performances of swords and jesters did Cao Ji address Handan. He changed clothes, then discussed topics such as the beginning of the universe and the evaluation of men since the time of Fu Xi. They recited their ancient and modern texts and discussed military strategies, then Cao Ji prepared a feast. When Handan Chun returned home, he praised Cao Ji as a heavenly man. Handan Chun was an expert in many types of script, including birdworm seal and those found in a dictionary, the Shuo Wen Ji Zi. He taught the classics and tadpole script, and his style of calligraphy was imitated by Wei Ji so well that he couldn't tell the difference between their copies of the Book of Documents. When Cao Cao was considering which of his sons would be named heir, Handan Chun recommended Cao Ji, which Cao Pi resented. Some think this is the reason why Cao Pi didn't name him as one of the 7 scholars of Jianan, a group of 7 intellectuals with good backgrounds in philosophy. However, the compiler of the Wei Lui, Yu Huan, named Handan Chun as one of the 7 Confucian exemplars, and Cao Pi later gave him the title of Erudite Supervising Secretary in 220. Upon leaving Linzi to Cao Pi's court in Luoyang, Handan wrote his famous farewell poem. It was actually a return poem to his fellow Wu Chu Zuan, who was likely an attendant in Cao Ji's court, but there are no mentions of him otherwise. When he wrote his Du Hu Fu, his rhyming explanation of the game of Du Hu, Cao Pi became greatly impressed. The game involved throwing sticks or arrows into jars, and was becoming ever popular with the educated elite. It was written and presented to Cao Pi in 220, who rewarded Handan with 1,000 bolts of silk. Handan Chun's most famous work is the Xiaolin, Forest of Humour, a collection of comedic anecdotes. It was most certainly enlarged in later dynasties, so it's not possible to affirm Handan Chun's authorship over all of the stories. There was once a man who was always eating vegetables, but one day he unexpectedly ate the meat from a sheep. He dreamt later that night the gods of the 5 internal organs saying to him, "The sheep had trampled on the vegetable garden." Handan Chun's Xiaolin is considered by scholars to be the first collection of jokes in Chinese literature and the earliest records of personalities. His collection, of which only fragments have survived, include humorous stories about people from his time and were clearly influenced by the popular stories from that time. They tend to mock the simplicity of men or the narrow-mindedness of greed. After he had passed and during Cao Fang's reign, many scholars wanted to make a stone tablet inscribed with the classics, written in 3 different script styles. They tried to recreate Handan's tadpole script, but his style of writing had been lost, even though it was emulated by others including Wei Guan's father and Zhong Yao. The scholars had to create a new tadpole script instead, obviously designed in a way which matches the style's name.